Hi, folks. It's Abu and Opsa
That's right.
here once again for another bonus episode.
Indeed.
We just can't help ourselves. We love sci-fi, and Severance is sci-fi. In fact, it's good sci-fi,
And that's what we're here to talk about.
and that's what we're going to talk about. So, wait, before we get into it, we should spoiler warning and
Yes.
kind of cover the context of today's bonus episode.
Yeah.
Folks, make sure you've watched all of Severance Season 1 before you listen today, and Severance Season 2, Episodes 1 through 5.
We're
By the time this episode goes out, just because of production timing, yes, we realize that like more episodes of Severance will be out. We're kind of behind. This conversation today is only going to cover 1 through 5.
Yeah.
So as long as you've watched those, then you're good to listen today.
Exactly. A
I'm
little bit
excited
of
to
a
talk
mid-season review here.
A little
and-
mid-season check-in for
There you go,
Severance.
yeah.
How are you feeling about the show?
Well,
What's your history with the show? Like, what did you think of season 1?
So I should say, as soon as season 1 came out, I noticed it. I had to watch it.
Yeah.
Immediately hooked.
Oh.
Season 1 was one of my favorite television seasons in quite a long time. I
Agreed.
really enjoyed so much about Severance, and I have been raving about the show and was so obviously frustrated when there was the writer strike that prevented the season 2 coming out, and obviously totally fair, but I'm hooked. I'm back on it.
You're back.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah.
3-year wait worth it so far for you?
3-year
In
wait.
the first 5 episodes here?
Absolutely
Yeah.
worth it. Yeah. I mean, we'll say more about it, but I think this season in particular has just such a cinematic kind of feel to it. It really feels like the time allowed the show to mature and deepen in ways that
Yeah.
season 1 was already quite
Spectacular.
spectacular season of television, and then this second season is nothing short of a masterpiece. So
Yeah.
that's my
What amazing that you use that
TLDR.
word before we're done with the season, but I actually agree.
yeah.
What a flex also to open season 2, episode 1
Yeah.
with like a long shot,
Right.
with a long tracking shot as
Yes.
we run through the maze
Yes.
to reintroduce us back to the severed floor,
Totally.
to get us back in that mind space and that
Yes.
headspace, but also just kind of like a production flex. To be
Absolutely.
like, we're back. We got a bigger budget. Thanks,
Absolutely.
Apple.
Yes.
And we're going to do some cool cinematography with it.
Yeah. that's definitely the name of the game for this season. There's some phenomenal cinematography throughout the season. And yes, the very first episode, they hit us with it immediately with
Yeah.
that long tracking shot of Mark running through the halls, and you feel like he's a mouse in a maze. There's a
Yeah.
kind of a lot of symbolism there, and it reminds us again that the severed floor and Lumen is this weird clinical,
Mhm.
really sterile environment, and it's also weirdly massive. So-
Oh my God. Yeah. The tracking shot goes on longer than
Yeah.
than is comfortable, which is obviously
Yes.
the intention.
Yes.
You're like watching it, and you're like, oh, cool. This is a fun shot.
Yeah.
It's not ending.
It's not ending.
really not ending. We're still
Exactly.
going.
Yeah.
So obviously the intention, and
Totally.
they nailed it.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's maybe how about we start broad?
Yeah.
Season 2, the first 5 episodes, the first half of the season.
Yes.
What are your big picture thoughts?
Yeah.
And then we both have some notes in front of us
Yeah.
into some details we want to dig down into.
Yes.
Specifically how amazing Milchick is as a character.
Yeah, Milkcheck, lots to say about him. Really shines in this season,
Yeah.
and I think let me. So I guess zooming out here, broad strokes. We know a few more things about the world of Lumen and the world of the citizens outside of it than we did in season 1, and what most stands out to me is you're kind of unaware in season 1 how many people are severed. And in season 2,
Mm.
you get the sense that, well, we're kind of in this like factory town. Like we're in a town where the vast majority of people are severed employees. And over the course of the season, you start to realize kind of how large of a hold that Lumen has on the rest of the world is, to the extent that, of course, at the end of season 1, and it can't be spoilers. I mean, everybody here that's listening hopefully has seen all of season 1 and is caught up here. But we learn kind of at the end of season 1 that the innies, Mark and Helly and Dylan and not Bert, but
Irv.
Irving. That's right, Irv, have essentially escaped they've been able to take advantage of what we later learn is called the Glasgow block, I believe.
Yeah. Or the overtime protocol.
That's it. It's the overtime protocol. That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The overtime protocol, and their secret's kind of out. I mean,
right.
We hear Helly at the weird Lumen conference.
I mean, Annie Mark talked to Devin and told Devin everything.
Exactly. Yes, and his wife in particular, or his sister, I should say.
Yeah.
In particular.
Like it's out.
It's out. The truth is out, and they are miserable inside. The conditions are not great.
No.
And the kind of campaign that Lumen is able to spin to really reposition themselves as, oh, well, we'll institute some reforms.
Yeah.
Kind of gives you a sense of how much power they kind of carry. That
truly, that they can come back from this PR disaster.
Yeah.
That would like put any other company under.
Yes.
For good.
Yes.
We're watching in the first couple episodes of season 2.
Yeah.
Them do these like reforms, quote unquote, but obviously we're seeing the Innie's perspective where things are like not actually changing.
Nothing has materially
outside
changed
of like
whatsoever.
Dylan getting to see his family, but even that is used as a lever of like manipulation and abuse.
It's totally coercive, Yeah.
It's not like actually a olive branch they're extending
right.
to improve the lives of the Innies.
Right.
It is just a way to control
right.
Innie Dylan even more.
Right.
What are you thinking of I'm fascinated by the concept of a mystery box show. Are you feeling like you're getting enough answers to be satisfied so far? Or is the mystery still too elusive and you're kind of like, come on, get on with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like I am getting just enough. I mean, to be fair, we really aren't getting to the heart of any of the core mysteries.
Yeah, like what the heck is Mark working on?
Yes.
What is it, Cold Spring?
Yeah, Cold Harbor.
Cold Harbor.
Project Cold Harbor, right.
Right.
So that, I think that is kind of, I'm trying to remember if we saw that right at the end of season 1, but we get I think it is, what we get to see Miss Casey, and there's the dial that is slowly incrementing up from 80 to 82 to 83 to eventually 85%. And in the season, Drummond, when talking to Helly, mentions that the work that Mark is doing will be remembered as one of the most important events in human history.
In all of human history, yeah.
So I don't know. I have my own speculations. We also had the moment in the goat room.
The goat room
was incredible. And it kind of got me thinking a little bit. So I've got some theories, some conspiracy theories, perhaps.
Yeah. I feel like,
but I don't know that they necessarily they haven't, I guess, really spoon fed you or really revealed. I mean, much of the mystery.
Not much, but I feel similar to you though, where I am in no rush to get to the answers.
Yeah.
And I think if we were already getting major reveals,
right,
I would maybe be a little less interested.
Yeah.
I think we're really letting the mystery simmer,
Totally.
but at the same time, like there are developments taking place.
Absolutely.
Like Audi Mark is working with that one woman to like trigger what is it called, reintegrate or whatever.
Reintegration,
So there are active choices by the
Yes.
characters being made.
Yes.
If they were still passively just being like abused by Lumen,
Right.
and the mystery was still in control of the show,
Right.
that I think would be frustrating.
Totally.
But the characters are in control of the show.
Totally.
And now we get to see this fun tension between Lumen fighting, characters fighting.
Right.
Every time we cut to the Innies, I'm so glad they're just rebelling. Nobody's at their
Yes.
desk doing
Right.
their job outside of Dylan, who is being manipulated,
Of course.
obviously.
Yes. Yeah.
So I agree. I don't think I need answers right away. I'm not
No.
feeling any urge to get the
Yes.
answers. I'm happy to continue watching the slow tension
Totally.
between our characters
Yeah.
and their motivations
Yeah.
and the company and whatever its elusive apocalyptic motivations are.
Absolutely. Yeah. I that's exactly my feeling. It's what's happening on screen is entertaining and intriguing enough that I almost kind of forget that there is this like underlying mystery that we're still kind of left in the dark,
which is a huge
about.
compliment
Which
to
is
a
a-
mystery box show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so shall we drill down into some specifics?
Yeah, let's do it.
Where do you want to start first? Is it our boy Milchick? Is it
Milchuk is, I think it is a good place for us to start.
Let's start
because
there.
he's such a fascinating character. Obviously, we discover early on in the season that he has essentially pinned everything on Harmony Cobell. And to be fair, she did kind of F things up.
She did. Yeah,
It's not
look, it
like
was a
she-
PR disaster under her
under her watch. Absolutely.
under her watch.
Yeah.
So the responsibility falls on her.
Totally. And we also learned that he is an unsevered man. It comes out in episode 1. So it's clear that, yes, Harmony was also unsevered. There are a few members of the staff that appear to be in this kind of odd role of being outies in Lumen.
Yes.
And we obviously see that with Helly later on, which we'll talk about in her little espionage moment. But Milchek is interesting. I think, for me, one of my favorite scenes this season was was him being given,
Oh my
being
God.
gifted, in fact,
Oh my
the
God.
recanonicalized portraits of Kier. And
Mhm.
it is so
In blackface.
disturbing.
To put it bluntly, like
yeah.
the paintings of Kier in blackface.
Yes.
Given to the now black manager of the
Yeah.
severed floor.
And I mean, there's so much just coded in that moment, in that scene, in the exchange between him and Natalie, who's
Oh my God.
always got the board in her ear, can't
Yes.
ever let herself, code switch or otherwise express any actual personal feelings on the matter. But you can just see in the tension as they stare into one another's eyes, and just the tiny, and honestly, like, huge kudos to the actor playing Natalie, but just the tiniest of muscle, facial muscle movements that clearly signify that if she could,
But the board is right here in her ear.
but she never
And
will.
also- yeah.
And he's
There's that great
also-
moment right before Milchik goes to his review.
Yeah.
Where he pulls Natalie aside and he's
Yes.
like, how did you, a fellow person of color,
Right.
feel about the paintings they gave you?
Right, which we loved. We loved the
We loved,
paintings,
right?
but
Right?
we might have felt some tension, possibly some awkwardness around it, right?
I loved that because,
Yes.
again, there's obviously that's an unspoken question about Lumen's racism. And
Yes.
Natalie is in a position where she can't respond to that.
Yes.
And it makes you feel for Milchik because Milchik is in a position where he's on an island
Yes.
in a deeply racist company and trying to reach out to a fellow person of color and cannot get a response back.
Yeah, I think it's part of why this show, I think, succeeds for me, especially in so many ways, is there's so many layers.
Truly.
There's so much being communicated, and you get almost the sense for some of the Lumen employees that they've in fact drunk the Kool-Aid, that they believe that the work of Lumen is in some way good. It is benevolent. I mean, there's absolutely a cult around Kier. And,
for sure.
And members like Milchek are a part of it.
Yes.
And then they're confronted with these moments where their humanity is not actually quite recognized and the fullness of who they are is not actually recognized by the company. And you remember that the company is not, in fact, your family. The company doesn't, in fact, have your best interests in its heart.
Right. And you could replace the word company in your statements there with the cult.
The cult.
The cult is actually not your family, despite what it may say about being family and Father Egan and whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
And the cult does not have your best interests at heart.
Not at all.
You know? And I think I like what you're getting at here, because I have a Milchik theory that we are watching over the course of season 2.
Yeah.
The birth of Rebel Milchik. I do think his humanity is going to be pushed and questioned one too many times by the end of this season. And I think he too is going to throw in with the rebellious innies against Lumen.
Interesting.
And we're kind of maybe going to see how he escapes the cult.
Yeah.
Or how he sort of confronts, because he's a believer to some extent that they are doing something that will be the greatest achievement of humanity. But I think we're also seeing him slowly start to question the cult and the cult's teachings.
Yeah.
Definitely
some cracks
I suspect
appearing.
by end of season 2, Milchik is going to have an interesting character arc.
Yeah.
It might be too bold to say he'll all out be a rebel and be full anti-Lumen, but I do think we're going to see some sort of Milchick's sort of meltdown or pushback
Right.
against Lumen.
Right. Maybe he looks away when something goes down, and who's to say?
That's
But
right. Yeah, maybe even a quiet rebellion.
maybe
where
even a
he
quiet rebellion.
allows the innies to get away with a
Yeah.
little something, which he
Yeah.
kind of does with Irving's funeral, which maybe we can
Right.
touch on for a minute.
Fair,
like,
yeah.
Watermelon head Irving aside, literally eats
Oh
the
my
head of your
God.
dead coworker.
Ah, wonderful.
The imagery is just so juicy. Like
Yeah.
Lumen, the show, I love because it somehow is striking the perfect balance
Yeah.
between utterly endearing.
Yes.
Dylan and Irving's relationship
Yeah.
is equally funny, touching, sad.
Yes.
And the show also manages to be completely like disconcerting and
Yes,
creepy and
totally,
weird.
Totally.
You know, just the fact that like Milchick allows them to have a funeral, which
Yeah.
Miss Wong is like, that makes them think they're human. They're not
Right.
human.
Right.
They're
Don't let them
innies.
think. Yeah. Exactly.
Don't let them think
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Milchick allows it, which to me
Yes.
feels like a subtle rebellion.
Right.
But then he also brings in a fucking head of Irving and tells them to eat it, which is just like
Right.
so. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like cannibalism coded. It's like weird. It's
Yeah.
dehumanizing.
Totally dehumanizing.
You know,
yeah.
Lumen's policies are so dehumanizing
Yeah.
to the innies,
Yeah.
and to some extent to also to Milchick and their other employees.
Right.
And it's really interesting to watch the characters grapple with that
Totally.
because
yeah.
they get some sort of closure with the funeral,
Yeah.
but they also get these weird Lumen things
Right.
that happen.
Right. And it's also, I mean, closure somewhat. I mean, the show raises a lot of questions in those moments. And I think the one in that scene in particular is Dylan describes Irving as having died.
Yes,
And
Mark.
he says he's just not here. And that's interesting because I
Yeah.
think that kind of cuts to the moral dilemma of this entire severed premise. You know,
Are innies people?
are innies people? Do they have souls? Are they
Once they leave this building, do they die?
exactly? And I think that question of whether the person on the inside has even sovereignty over themselves
Yeah.
is kind of
Ooh.
brought to mind here. Pivoting a little bit to Helly because
Yes. Oh my gosh.
I think
Speaking of-
she hopscotches across the severed line in some
Yep.
interesting ways over the course of this season. I don't know. Tell me, what do you think about what happened between her and Mark in definitely the best episode of the season, the Orko episode.
Oh my God, the Orko episode.
Such an interesting episode, but yes.
Yeah. First of all, I'd like to know what shape we're calling this relationship. Is it
Yeah.
now a love triangle
Yeah.
when you sleep with your girlfriend's Audi by accident,
Right.
unbeknownst to
Right.
you?
Right.
Is that cheating?
Yeah.
You know, it raises a lot of relationship questions that are
Totally.
neither here nor there.
Totally.
But great reveal.
Yes.
I think it raises a lot of similar questions about, do innies have souls? What is their autonomy?
Yeah.
A really touching moment that got me in episode 5 is when Innie Helly is allowed to come back,
Yeah.
basically.
Right.
She goes to Mark and she's like, that's not me.
Yeah.
She stole my body.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
Like, that gives me goosebumps because
Yeah.
like Innie Helly has
Yeah.
like now sort of self-actualized in a way where she considers herself a
Yes.
person and this is her
Yeah.
body.
Bodily autonomy, and yeah, totally.
And she feels violated
Yes.
that someone else would steal it from her.
Right.
Which Lumen would argue, contractually speaking,
Yeah.
this is Audi
Yes.
Helena Egan's body.
Yes.
This is not your body, Innie
Right.
Helen. You have no right to this body
Right.
at all. But clearly, Helly is like very violated. And I
Totally.
think it's especially powerful that this like bodily autonomy like stress point
Yeah.
is coming from the only woman in the office.
Right.
Like the only
That
woman
is-
in MDR.
That's a very good point.
Because
Yeah.
that obviously thematically speaks to a lot of
Yes.
female bodily autonomy
Totally,
questions.
yeah.
You know, who has the
Absolutely.
right to your body, who takes it away
Yes,
from you, which
totally.
corporation, etc.
Absolutely.
Huge fan. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah.
Mark in episode 5 is still being a fucking weirdo about
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
and
fair.
deeply uncomfortable.
Yes, yeah.
And hasn't brought it up with
Yeah. I mean, to be
Innie
fair,
Helly yet.
I mean, he was also violated.
he was violated. He slept with a
that's,
woman he didn't. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really kind of unusual, and that's kind of where like this sci-fi premise allows for some really interesting conversations.
Amazing.
Because in what world are we talking about? Like all of this feels really quite divorced, in some regards from day-to-day life. But on the other hand, it touches on absolutely these like deeper themes that resonate, with, bodily autonomy is something that obviously is at risk in many ways, in the present
Absolutely.
moment. So
Yeah. Did we also want to chat a little bit about? Well, we're already on the Orpo episode.
let's talk about
Let's just vibe out about the
Let's talk
Orpo
about the
episode for
Orpo.
a bit, because
Okay.
this felt like. So I saw a great article on Polygon this
Yeah.
week about the Orpo episode,
Yeah.
And the premise of the article was basically, TV shows are too short these days, because the Orpo episode feels like old school TV, where you kind of go off on a side adventure for an episode.
Yeah, totally.
And
totally.
you kind of
It's like
pause
the
on
beach
the main
adventure.
plot
Yeah,
for a bit.
Totally.
And you do a little side quest.
Yes.
But the side quest kind of loosely feeds into the main
Totally.
plot, but also like reveals so much about the characters, about their lives, about the world building.
Yes.
TV shows, when they used to have, 24 episode seasons, had the breathing room to be like, let's do the occasional side quest episode, go off the beaten path. This episode took the risk in doing that, and I think absolutely hit a home run.
Smashed it. No, absolutely.
Absolutely smashed it, because we got to do a whole episode outside of
Lumen,
the Lumen
actual,
office.
Yes.
And we got like more insight into weird Kier
lore
and philosophy. Something about masturbating in the forest in front of your brother until you melt. It like we got this
just
great,
deranged. It's
deranged.
Honestly,
The cult-like behavior,
totally.
the creepy tent situation.
Totally.
Milchick's fit. I mean,
oh
my
yeah,
god,
all the furs. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like I think Ortbo will go down as an all-timer.
100%
for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, again, like to your point, it's one of the few moments we get to see outside of the Lumen offices, and it also allows for many different shots. Like we got to see this really nice panned out view of the mountains and the forest that they were in a way that was like completely different than our sterile, really cold and otherwise really not human kind of feel and vibe of the Lumen offices.
Absolutely.
And just that alone was, that opening shot I thought was really quite beautiful. And all of a sudden I was like, did I turn on the wrong show? Am I watching Alone right now? And I also, it kind of had me questioning my sanity a little bit. I was like, are we still inside Lumen somehow?
Yes. The whole time I was waiting for some sort of like, they're jacked into the Lumen matrix.
Right.
And this is just VR.
Yes, exactly.
I was waiting for that moment to happen.
Yeah.
And honestly, I didn't believe it until like 3/4 of the way into the episode, where I was like, oh, they're actually outside. They let the innies out on a vacation? Not really a vacation, like a work trip.
Right.
Very weird situation.
Yeah.
It didn't help that the whole episode kind of feels like a dream because of the Kier philosophy and Milchick doing the incredible storytelling and reading them the culty book and everything.
Yeah.
So I think they nailed that like dreamlike vibe of the episode.
Totally.
But of course we get huge revelations with the Heli reveal and then Irv.
And then Irving, obviously is kind of
immediately getting
I don't know what he picked up on, but he clearly could see that Heli was not Heli. And it does, again, speak to the humanity of the innies. Like they are absolutely...
They feel all the feelings.
They feel all the feelings, and
they fell in love.
They fell in love, And
you see, most human of feelings.
Absolutely.
Love.
And you see, of course, we see Dylan eventually with his Audi wife.
Oh my, that scene.
It's clear why it works to have him, essentially coerced in this way by Milchick. It's because he needs he wants and needs that connection, and he saw his child, and
oh my God.
It's just the case that humans' relationships to their children are, and all kind of living beings, like relationships to their progeny is so intense, and it you can't
and that kind of the Dylan family thing raises a question that I think Mark is also struggling with.
Yeah,
is Miss Casey my wife?
Right. My wife.
And is Dylan, I'm sure Dylan is like, I guess these are my kids.
Yeah.
I don't remember having them or raising them.
Right.
So I think the innies are also sort of having this like existential struggle with who they are.
Yeah.
And at this moment, the innies are either unable to, or I guess they just can't seem to conceptualize the idea of being a totally different person than their outie.
Yeah.
Mark is still kind of connected to the wife that's not his wife,
Right.
technically.
Right.
And Dylan is connected to a family. Any Dylan is connected to
Right.
a family that's not technically his family.
Not exactly his. Yeah.
Yeah, they can't seem to break away and create their own personalities.
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, actually, I mean, when Mark kind of confronts Helena about the fact that Helena Egan,
Yeah.
was, basically, demolished all of their plans, and he and her had been essentially mapping the floor and getting
Right.
to understand,
Right.
this like the landscape that they find themselves in, and in that kind of confrontation, yeah, he's angry, like, and understandably, all
Yeah.
of their plans are now fully transparent to
Ugh.
Lumen, which probably they were. There are cameras everywhere, so it's not
That's
like
true.
they were totally being covert about it. But in that moment, in any case, he says to her, like, I couldn't tell, I didn't know, I thought she was you, and
Right.
that's really tough, because clearly the innies have their own personalities. I mean, it seems like they do,
Right.
that are distinct from their outies, and obviously they have different experiences, and your experiences will shape your
Yeah.
personality and character. But on the other hand, why was it that Helena could so convincingly play Helly?
Right.
It's just clearly
Right.
the case that, and even Mark Audi, yes, Mark's Audi is definitely depressed, and he's been wrestling with all sorts of really painful circumstances from his wife's alleged death. But you can see some similarities in the two
Yes.
characters and personalities. So yeah, the question of how really independent they are from their
Right.
Audis is not, it's not so clear.
It's not so clear.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. I mean, there's even the line where Audi Helena, I think in the chat with Natalie and the other board guy or
Drummond,
whatever, Drummond, she was like, "They're animals. I'm not
Right.
going back down there."
Right.
But any Heli is
Yeah.
literally like, "I'm a human being. I'm not an
Right.
animal."
Right.
So like that's an opposite opinion
Yeah.
that two any Audis can
Yes.
have about the same thing.
Yes. About themselves.
About themselves.
Yeah.
And so that's how much of that bleeds over. Because
Yeah.
remember, Milchek also went to Mark and to convince him to come back to the company.
Right.
He was like, "Your innie has found love.
Right.
And if you give it enough time,
Right.
that love will bleed back out to you as
Right.
the Audi."
That's right. And you'll
Like,
get that joy.
Is he
and-
lying, or is that
Yeah.
a real side effect of any Audi severance? Like,
right.
do the personalities start bleeding into each
Yeah.
other?
Like, how divorced are they actually? And how divorced could they
Such
be?
fascinating questions. How divorced can you be?
Yeah.
How does it even work?
Yeah.
Is it clones? There's like clone theories out there
Exactly.
that like, I don't believe this at all, but
Yeah.
like theories.
Well, let's get into the speculation
Sure.
about what we think the mystery is, and our kind of like
Okay.
conspiracies about what's coming down the pike.
Here's a couple I want to shoot down right away.
Yeah.
Ortbo is an anagram for robot. I think the show has nothing to do with robots.
Yeah.
I think they're intentionally throwing us like a fake red herring.
That's a good
they're
one.
like,
okay.
Here's one for the fucking conspiracy theorists to go ham over.
Interesting.
And I think Ortbo is just kind of a silly moniker also.
Yes,
So I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
I don't think robots are involved in this show.
Okay.
I think that I just don't see it.
Yeah.
The other theory that I've read online then is the clone theory. I haven't dug too deep into this theory, but my basic understanding is that the theory goes that, I don't know, I guess perhaps every time they get in the elevator, a clone of them is made in down under and then recycled and recloned. And so like,
interesting.
And maybe all that's being like sort of downloaded is their consciousness or like a copy of their consciousness that they don't have access to only the clone.
Interesting, considering what book we're reading next.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, we're reading Mickey 7 coming up. So again, I think that's just a tad too convoluted for what we're doing
would agree
here,
with that. I would agree with that.
I don't think we've hinted at the thing that I think sparked this clone theory is that Kier had a twin sibling, quote unquote, in the legend.
Right.
Apparently a secret twin sibling that no one has ever heard of. The fourth appendix.
Yeah.
And so I think that has sort of sparked a clone theory where people are like, Kier didn't have a twin.
Got it.
Kier made the first ever clone of himself.
Right.
And now Lumen is a company that clones other people.
Got it.
I don't That's another theory that I'm going to go ahead and not put my hat in the ring for.
Okay.
I don't believe that one.
Okay. Let me see if
But
I can convince you.
sure.
On
Okay,
the
let's
other
hear
side.
it. I'm ready.
So that version of it is definitely, I would agree, is a little too convoluted to, and really a little unsatisfying. If that's what if we get to episode 10 and they're like, it's kind of like, what? But okay, these are I feel like the breadcrumbs that have led me to a clone theory.
Mm-hmm.
So the sheep, Dolly, first clone sheep, and I can't get over like why the goats, why the sheep, why this weird room where you've got these like goat herders and that whole kind of tribe of folk. Okay. So the goat thing kind of got me thinking, all right, clones, maybe something in this direction. And we've got, of course, Project Cold Harbor, which Mark and the other members of MDR are working on. And again, there was that one scene where you see Miss Casey and she appears to be there's like a loading bar in the shot that she's in.
Yeah.
And it's at 85%. And the sense that I got was that maybe what Mark was doing in the refining and maybe what they're all doing is essentially kind of capturing the cognitive patterns and behaviors of real humans that will then be essentially copied over to a physical clone.
Whoa.
So that the process is not physically like they can do a physical duplicate of the body. I feel like that is probably already, like scientifically possible even today. But to be able to capture the mind in in the clone, I think is where they're essentially doing the work to help.
The R&D is still happening for that part.
The R&D is still happening for that part, and they're getting closer to a perfect 100% duplicate of the mind, but there's some human massaging essentially that needs to happen, and that for whatever reason, Mark being maybe the closest to Miss Casey, and I guess my theory is that Miss Casey is the first human to be perfectly digitally cloned.
Interesting.
Is the and maybe Mark is the best possible person to do that, knows her the best, and maybe that's why he's yeah
that makes a lot of sense, because MDR's, I forget exactly how they described it in season 1, but isn't their job to just like look at the numbers and click on what feels right?
Yes, and put them into the bins based on the vibe.
What the vibe is.
Yeah,
and that's a great theory, because what feels right is just like, okay, what my human instincts are telling me. And that's data that then Lumen can generate into the digital human consciousness of some sort.
Yeah.
Crazy. Look at the questions the show is raising. Like, this is good sci-fi, baby. Like, it's compelling. It's interesting. Yeah. The characters are incredible.
Yes.
You're rooting for all of them.
Yeah.
It's well paced. It's well shot.
Yeah.
And it continues in big and small ways to ask like the biggest, most existential questions. And I think that's what makes the best of sci-fi great.
Definitely.
What a great show. To wrap up, would you sever? And if no, could something convince you to sever?
You know what? I feel like I've got a gut reaction to this that I wouldn't.
Right. Certainly the show doesn't make it seem like an appealing situation.
I mean, even if they had, I think, made Severed Life, I think that's kind of one of the things that's funny about the show, that they, by having such a wild conceit and premise in the Severance, they're able to kind of sneak in a few things that are honestly like much less believable even than Severance. And in particular, that any corporation in the United States, I mean, maybe this isn't as far-fetched, but like that any corporation in the United States could kind of act with the amount of impunity that that they do, like that. There's no, wellness checks is like a reform that's instituted in the second season. There are no wellness checks. There's a 14-year-old former crossing guard who's now
child labor,
who's not a friend, a supervisor, to be clear. According to her. So I think that's kind of that's kind of the one of the more just somewhat easily forgotten but also far-fetched premises of the show is that there is this corporation that acts
Yeah,
this way,
big evil
and
corporation.
so I think if that were set aside and instead we had like the Apple of Severance, then
Apple is loving hearing this. Keep going. Apple
sponsored
sponsor us.
by, then I think it becomes a much more compelling and difficult question.
Yeah.
And because I think like so many of us kind of hate our jobs, and so
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, of course I would get like if I could just have the income but not do the labor, or like like
Right. What?
I
Of
can
course.
I can definitely see that being I guess an
Yeah.
easier choice.
And I think that's why the show worked so well. Like
Yeah.
immediately 5 minutes into the first episode, you're like, I'm in.
Yeah,
Like
totally.
I would sever.
Totally.
Kind of like winning the lottery or
Yes.
being able to see the future, right?
Right.
At first glance, you're like, yes, I want to
Yes.
win the lottery.
Of course I
Yes,
do.
I want to see the
Yes.
future.
Right.
And then you spend like 30 minutes thinking too much about it.
Yeah.
And you're like, seeing the future would be horrible.
Yeah.
Winning the lottery will ruin my life.
Right.
Being severed is actually an ethical and moral and
Total.
like capitalist disaster.
Yes, exactly.
So I love that the show offers you a thing that sounds instantly compelling,
Right.
and then continues to just pull the rug out from under you.
It's a
over
real
and over
long
again.
rug
A
pull.
very slow rug pull.
Yeah. So I think that's ultimately I think I fall on the side of like no, and even in the most ideal conditions of a lumen that feels like glorious and wow, look at this
Right.
campus, and our meals are catered, like even in
Right.
that world I think I don't think I think that's the commentary I think there is that we have to do that today. Like we have to when we enter the office or we
Mhm.
turn on the Zoom, that we code switch and we
Yeah.
become
Right.
employee OPSA or
Ugh.
sibling so-
Folks, you do not want to meet employee Abu. He's a fucking bore.
So I mean that's what I mean. Like I think the to some extent to your question,
We already do.
do we already do it?
I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Are we
Yeah.
all already severed
Are we already
in our
severed?
jobs?
Yeah.
What a great show. I can't wait to watch the rest of the season. And for our listeners, I think the plan is that once the season wraps up,
Yep.
all 10 episodes are out, we will check back in with
That's
another
right.
episode.
We'll
We'll
do
talk
another.
about the rest of the season.
Yeah.
Because we're loving the show and we're not going to stop watching, of course.
Fantastic.
So we have a kind of a busy schedule coming up.
That's
we're going to
right.
be talking we're going to be reading Mickey 7 and covering Mickey 17, the
That's
movie.
right. Coming out.
And
not too soon.
then speaking of Apple TV Plus just announced the Murderbot TV
what
show.
are you doing to us?
Incredible.
2025. Incredible.
It's going to be a busy year for
Yeah.
us. And we've already covered the first Murderbot book,
Yeah.
and we're going to squeeze in the second one just in
Yes.
time for the show to come out. So we have a busy couple of months, but we're also going to try and squeeze in Severance
Yeah.
also because we're loving it. We're
Yeah.
having fun.
Busy doing things we love.
Things we love.
Yeah.
Wouldn't want to be severed for this recording.
Exactly.
You know, I want to be all here for
That's
this.
right. That's right.
All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining us for a little bonus conversation about Severance. As always, reach out to us, Sci-Fi Book Club Pod at loreparty.com. You can also hop in the Discord and Patreon. Those are free to join and sign up. That's where we hang out, chat with our lovely community, geek out about sci-fi stuff.
That's right.
And that's where we'd love to hear your Severance theories as well. Is it clones? Is it robots?
Yeah.
What's
Is it
going on?
neither?
Is it neither?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's going to happen?
Exactly.
Come hang out, come chat with us. We have a lovely, nerdy little group going. That's it for today's bonus. We'll see you for our coverage of Mickey 7, which is
That's
up next.
right.